Good morning. Thanks for tuning in. I'd like to share some words of hope today that come from a story, an account that I read in a biography about Dr. Paul Brand called 10 Fingers for God. I think most of you know that I've talked about Dr. Brand before. He was a missionary doctor in India, and he really kind of unraveled the mystery and the mystique around leprosy, that it attacks the central nervous system and that people literally live in a painless hell and destroy their bodies. But he was an expert at reconstructing people's hands especially, but also faces and eyebrows and noses and all kinds of things. Just a beautiful person. Well, he was touring the United States and in the early 60s. And while he was in the United States, he would speak at different universities. He was invited, I believe this day, to speak at Stanford University. It was a Sunday. It was a chapel of some sort. But this was November. It was late November, and John F. Kennedy had been shot a couple days earlier. And here he is, coming over from India, a British citizen, and he's supposed to address these Americans. And America was in shock. Not only had America found out the news that their president had been murdered in the streets of Dallas, but then the person that they assumed was the murderer was shot to death on live TV. Most people saw that. And as it got closer for him to speak that day, he's thinking, I probably should have somebody else speak because there's this whole other dynamic that's going on here. And the chaplain, whoever was that introduced him, didn't really do him any favors by saying, well, we were thinking of canceling him, but we're gonna go with it anyway. And Dr. Brand got up there and just did a masterful job of reaching out. And sometimes the person who's outside the situation can reach in better than somebody who's so affected. But he said that there was a profound connection between him and the group of people. And it was one of the best responses he ever got from people. As I think about that, I realize that there's been different times where I'm putting a message together. And there are times where I'm like, so no one's going to know if I don't say this because this is a little risky here, Jesus. I'm not going to say this. Time and again, it's happened where one time I was doing a funeral and I knew that at this funeral many people didn't go to church. And on behalf of the church, I asked the people there to forgive the church and specifically forgive me because we haven't been the example that we're supposed to be. And I literally looked at my notes and I was saying, Jesus, no one here is going to miss this if I don't say this. And Jesus was pretty much saying, except me, I'm going to miss it. And do you know that the next day, someone that was seated on the front row showed up at church? That man had left church decades earlier. But when I said that day, it was for him. May have been for other people too, but he showed up at our church. He became a member of our church. I had my photo taken with him and he shared it with people. It was the day hell froze over. Because he said, the day I join a church, hell's going to freeze over. And then I preached his funeral. I remember another occasion where I didn't want to go into my story about the fact that I'm divorced. I'm open about telling the story, but this one day I was like, I don't want to go into that story. And I did. And afterwards, a young lady came up to me and she said, I've never heard a preacher talk about their divorce before. Could we get a cup of coffee? We got together, we talked. It was a profound connection with her, and she was so grateful that I was open and honest in the pulpit. What am I saying this for? What are the things in your world today? What are you looking at and you're saying, I don't really want to go there? Sometimes to get the good fruit, you've got to go out on the branch. Sometimes you've got to be a risk taker. You've got to do what no one's going to fault you for not doing. But if you do it, God can use you in a way that you couldn't be used otherwise. God bless you. Have a great week.